a role that was established as a result of a law being passed in the Senedd, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So Wales is the only country in the world to have legislated to protect the interests of future generations, the only country in the world to have an independent commissioner overseeing this, and that's me.
And it's a big change this year, haven't we? We've got Vote 16 happening and so many young people able to have their say about the future, and they're telling you, aren't they, what they want to see, what that future looks like.
Absolutely. And I think, some of the big challenges that are facing us, climate change, the change in nature of work, so, automation, artificial intelligence, young people who are voting now will be what was described as digital natives. So that means they've grown up in a world where digital has been entirely the norm, not like my generation where we had to, I remember being in school using the clunky old Microsoft version 1 and so on. And it's a whole different world now. And sadly, however, sometimes, quite often, in fact, a lot of the policies that we take through, a lot of the decisions that are taken are only really taken in the here and now without considering the way in which they might affect young people, our children, grandchildren and future generations to come.
So you're looking into the future for us. What do you see? What's it looking like?
Well, some significant changes, and of course, whether it's a positive future or a negative future will very much depend on some of the things that we do right now. Climate change is a huge issue, so about 8 years left to save the planet from catastrophic damage. And at the moment, we are using about 2.5 times every year, 2.5 times the Earth's resources. So that means we're kind of, taking out a mortgage, if you like, or taking out a loan on the future of the planet. But also things like poverty. So how does poverty, people growing up in poverty, children growing up in poverty, how does that affect their life chances in the future? So we know that if you grow up in poverty, you're less likely to, get the 5 good GCSEs. You're more likely to be not in education or training, for example. You're more likely to have ill health. And of course, during the pandemic at the moment, we've seen that it's those people who are living in poverty where there's been the highest rates of COVID cases and the highest rates of death. And that's not surprising. It's not surprising at all. We've absolutely known that those people living in poverty are more likely to have that impact, and yet we've not taken the steps to try and really tackle poverty to stop that happening.
When you took on that role, COVID didn't exist. How has it changed your perspective of what you're looking at for the future? Because of course, a big part of what's going to be happening in the future is recovery.
Absolutely. Well, what's really interesting as well is the fact that how we've responded to COVID. So first off, we were, no one was prepared for it. Now, that says something about how well we think about the future and how well we prepare for risks, because actually a global pandemic has been in the top 10 of global risks on the global risk register for very many years. So it shouldn't have come as a surprise to us. We should have been prepared for it, much like climate change. Top 3 in the global risk registers, we're still not doing enough. But I think thinking about the kind of response to COVID, back last May, when we were just at the beginning of the pandemic, I had to produce, by law, I have to produce something called the Future Generations Report. And that's my recommendations to government of the things that I think they should be focusing on for the next Senedd elections. And the sorts of things that we were talking about was the fact that people being close to nature is really important, really good for their mental health, their physical health, it's good for the planet. Things like considering a universal basic income, which perhaps we'll talk about in a moment, to try and tackle poverty. Things like how do we tackle childhood adversities? So 14% of the population in Wales have grown up in households where there's domestic abuse or substance misuse or mental health problems or so on. And the life chances for those people are, it's a real negative impact. So we're making lots of recommendations about that. And so what I found actually is that, obviously I didn't plan the global pandemic or anything like that, but so many of those issues have become even more relevant during COVID. So the amount of time that people have had to spend, out walking in parks and so on, and the disadvantage that if you're living in a poorer community, you're less likely to have access to public open space. The fact that we've all been local And what has that meant to, what's happened in the past in terms of the dismantling of some of our local facilities and so on? So should we be moving back to 20-minute neighbourhoods? The impact of home working. Do we all need to be travelling down the M4 to get to work for 9 o'clock? COVID has shown us, no, actually we don't. We can work from home. So I think it's accelerated some of the positive trends as well as being really challenging in other areas.
Really interested to go back to something which you've just brought up, universal basic income. It ties into anti-poverty measures. Explain what it is and why you think it's the way forward.
So a universal basic income is an unconditional payment. So it doesn't matter whether you work, you don't work, whether you're on benefits, you're not on benefits, and so on. An unconditional payment which is given to every adult in Wales. And why do I think that that's important? Well, if we look at perhaps the current, but also particularly future trends, the change in nature of work. So there's been a huge increase over recent years in the number of people who are working in 0-hour contracts. So you could be earning £500 one week and £50 the next week. And our welfare system can't cope with that. It can't cope with that fluctuating income and so on. Things like the gig economy. So this is where people are working multiple different jobs. So you might have, your Uber Eats delivery person who's also, a graphic designer as a freelancer and so on. And those people don't have access to that kind of regular and stable income or to employment rights and so on. And we also know that about 1 in 4 people in Wales live in poverty. And we've talked about the impacts that poverty can have on your health, on the prosperity of your community, and so on. And so I think a universal basic income could be something which would lift thousands and thousands of people out of poverty. I think it would remove the stigma of, you're a benefit claimant, you're a scrounger, all of these sorts of things, the negative things that are often said or felt by people who make use of the welfare state. I also think when we think about things like automation and how some of our jobs may well be completely displaced, certain jobs may disappear. Certain jobs may need less human time on them because they're automated. There's a case to say that actually, if we reduce the number of hours that we were working alongside automation and artificial intelligence, but with that backup of a basic income that everyone receives, what could we do with that time on our hands? Could we be volunteering in the local community centre? Could we be addressing some of the care needs that are coming our way because of the numbers of older people who are living longer and longer? Could we be taking a bit of a punt to set up a business? And we've seen, I think, during COVID with that furlough scheme, which is a kind of a form of basic income, we've seen lots of little entrepreneurial businesses set up. I was only talking yesterday with some of my children about the number of women that I've seen, setting up businesses, making jewellery and doing art and various other things, possibly because they've been on furlough, they've had that time to do it. What could that mean in terms of our economy if we made that something that we actively pursued?
Now, you're part of a big drive, a new campaign that's been launched by UBI Lab Wales. A number of people have already signed up for it, AMs, MPs and high flyers like yourself. How important is it that that campaign is driven forward into policy? Because we know that a number of councils in North Wales have already given it the green light as a potential pilot.
Well, there are councils across Wales now who are saying, do you know what, we have this long-term intergenerational problem with poverty and we need to find new solutions. It's not going away, and this is something which we think we should give it a try. There was a trial in Finland which showed that it certainly improved people's well-being. There was an uptake of people starting businesses, for example. There was an improvement in people's health, and we know that all of those things tend to come from reducing poverty. So what I'm saying is, I think that, we've spent £400 billion responding to COVID through the furlough scheme and the funding for the NHS and so on. I think it's time we should start looking at a greater spend and new ways of addressing poverty in order to prevent what might not be seen to us as an immediate crisis in front of our face, but which we know the long-term impacts of poverty are really significant.
I've spoken to Jonathan at UBI Lab Wales, and he said to me that if we just took an extra 5% of that top layer of billionaires, millionaires, and fed it through to the people who need it most, potentially, he was saying something like even just like 5% could fund it for 4 years.
Well, you know, isn't it funny how we can find money when we need to? We've managed to find 400 billion quid down the back of the sofa somewhere. And, you know, I think now is the time to be looking at how, yes, do we redistribute wealth across the world. The wealth of the world is concentrated in a tiny number of hands. And this isn't, you know, and very many people are living in poverty. So it is time that we start thinking about how do we shift that so that we are making those who are higher earners, you know, help out those who are not.